Hey everybody, welcome back to these behaviour evolution scriptures that we're working on. And we're coming towards the end of Judges now. And what a sad and sorry state of affairs is it in Canaan with the nation of Israel. What's gone down? It's completely disgusting the way they're behaving, isn't it? I mean, we had, none of these stories end well for any of these judges, really, does it? It says they lived a certain amount of years, but how was it? There was Deborah and Barak and Zer, that was a hideous story. Then we had Gideon, and then he ended up setting up idolatry for his people. Then, you know, Abimelech, yeah, we had him. And then we dealt with Jephthah, who had to sacrifice his own daughter. And then of course Samson and his exploits with Delilah and his murders, and then he had to be killed in order to be useful. What about what's going down in these dark times? It's almost like the Dark Ages, isn't it? Today we're coming to Micah and it doesn't get any better. In fact, it's even worse, really. Let's go into the text, because the text here explains pretty much what's going on. We're going into Judges 17 and 18, so it's our second last video, I think. The death of Samson closes the official age of the judges. Samson was pretty much the last judge. So as we finish up the book of Judges in the next few videos, 5 chapters, let's point out a couple of important features. First, Judges chapter 11 through 21, end of the book, are usually called appendices by many, and there's good reason for that, because these chapters don't even deal with any judges. Samson was the last judge. The last few chapters, starting today here, don't even deal with any judges. Rather, it's just a general information that is meant to add to our overall understanding of the era of the judges. Second, as often happens in the scripture, these final chapters are not in chronological order. So even though Samson was the last judge, Samson is often called a judge as well as a prophet, but he was more of a transitory figure, ushering Israel from the era of the judges into the era of the kings. So putting Samuel aside, Samson was pretty much the last judge. Anyway, the point is that from this account of Micah probably occurred at least 200 years before Samson. So this thing we're reading today about Micah happened 200 years before Samson, around the time of Othniel, the first judge. Remember Othniel? First judge we talked about? Is this getting confusing? Why isn't the text in chronological order? Because the Hebrews were less concerned with time and more concerned with the subject matter. So it is in some kind of order, it's just not in time order. In other words, while modern writers and teachers generally have a greater concern to present a story based on the order things happen, that's how I would tend to think. The ancient Hebrews held a greater concern to present a story based on connecting the major elements of the story, even if it took place in different eras. So they're doing their order based on geography, really, not time. So since Samson was from the tribe of Dan, these so-called appendices deal with the tribe of Dan and the history of the tribe of Dan, especially in how they had fallen so far away from Yahusha and what happened when they abandoned their territorial allotment to move further north to an easier life, they thought. So this is almost like we're moving into the book of Dan, you know. And if there had been a split after Samson, if Samson was the end of Judges and then we had this little few chapters called the book of Dan, it would make more sense, because you expect things to start at different times. Anyway, it didn't go like that. We're still in Judges, but that's why these things are in this order. It's not time order, it's geographical order. Third thing is the entire purpose and tone of the period of the Judges, and the scriptural record of that period, is to demonstrate that Israel in particular, and all mankind in general, needed a king. The very words of this book, the pattern Yahusha lays down from Genesis to Revelation, shows that mankind, and perhaps all beings, physical or spiritual, must have a king to guide them. And then the fact that throughout the latter text, Yahusha is called a king, and a king forever, in fulfillment of earlier prophecy, says that it cannot possibly be that Yahusha doesn't want man to have a king. The issue is which earthly king, not whether or not there should be one. We will find several places in these appendices the words, "At that time there was no king in Israel, so every man did what was right in his own eyes." In other words, one caused the other. The lack of a king led to each man choosing his own way. Israel's refusal to have a king caused a kind of spiritual anarchy to develop within the tribes. What we must see is that since chronologically speaking, these final chapters should, from the modern perspective, actually be placed at the beginning of the book of Judges, as a preface to the book of Judges rather than an appendix at the end. The entire premise for what goes on in Judges and the deteriorating condition of the tribe of Israel that we observe as we read the book can be summed up in those words. At that time there was no king in Israel, and so every man did what was right in his own eyes. Israel needed a king, and Israel is going to have a king, as will all mankind, in the form of Yahusha, the Messiah for all eternity. What was the point of all that? It was really just to say that these last few chapters that we're going to read could have easily been put at the beginning of Judges. We could have started with them. Of course we didn't. We're going through the traditional chapter 1 to chapter 21, as you do when you read the scriptures. But historically, and as time chronologically goes, these books that we're reading now, we could have read at the beginning. So don't think that they're going in time order. Okay, that was the point. So let's talk about Micah. Now, the traditional way to spell Micah is with a C, but the Hebrew way to spell it is with a K. I know I'm going traditional with these scriptures, they're English all the way, but my son's name is Micah and he spells it with a K, so I'm doing it for you, Mikey. We're going with a K today, because I like the way it's spelled anyway. So we're going with it. Plus, it's not hard to pronounce either, it's not weird. Micah belonged to the Ephraim tribe and lived in the hill country. One day he told his mother, "Mum, do you remember those 1,100 pieces of silver that were stolen from you? I was there when you put a curse on whoever stole them. Well, I'm the one who did it." His mother answered, "Well, I hope that Yahuwah will bless you instead, my son." Why this sudden bout of conscience? Because he overheard his mother pronouncing a curse on the thief. Many say that it was no accident that Micah's mother spoke this curse within his hearing, because she probably knew full well that her son was a thief, and this overheard curse, she hoped, would provide the incentive for him to come forward and return the stolen funds. In the scriptural days, curses were taken very seriously. We can call them superstitious if we like, but to the people of that day, it was understood that being the subject of a proper worded curse from anyone put you under the darkest of dark clouds. So you didn't want to get cursed. And this is not Yahusha's curse, blessings and curses that Yahusha pronounces for obedience and disobedience, life and death. These are just stupid curses amongst the town folk, and they are superstitious. And they're based on this polytheistic system of deities that they still believed in and wouldn't give up. And that's why Yahusha comes along and says, don't be cursing and blessing, don't make vows or anything, just let your yes be yes, your no be no. Speak normally and stop being an idiot, Micah returned the silver to his mother, and she said, "I give this silver to Yahuwah. I give this silver to Yahuwah so my son can use it to make an idol." What? He gives his mother back the silver and she says, "I give this silver to Yahuwah so my son can use it to make an idol." Then turning to her son, she said, "Micah, the silver now belongs to you. Go and make an idol with it." This sort of perverted practice must have been repeated 1,000 times over in the tribe of Israel during the time not long after Joshua and his divinely led leadership ended with his death. The mother dedicates the money to Yahusha and then keeps the vast bulk of it for herself. The money she does give is used to make a Torah forbidden image of Yahusha, and even that is selfish because she will use it only in her own household. But it's about to get worse though. Micah handed the silver back to his mother, so she took 200 pieces of the silver and gave it to a silver worker who made them into an idol. which they kept in Micah's house. He had a shrine for worshipping Yahusha there at his home, and he also had some idols and a sacred priestly vest, an ephod. Remember, like Gideon made? He had the bloody ephod. They're all into this ephod. Why? Because that's what the highest man in the nation wore, the high priest, an ephod. If he can have one, so can we. Why not? Then Micah chose one of his own sons to be the priest for his shrine. He set up his own little tabernacle in his own home. He's got shrines, he's got idols, he's got a sacred priestly vest, an ephod. Now he's just chosen one of his sons to be a priest. This was before, here, this is the Yahusha's reasoning behind all this. This was before, just understand guys, this was before kings ruled Israel. And so all the Israelites did whatever they thought was right in their own opinion, all right? So, don't take it seriously, they're off their face. This is before there was a king, guys, so they don't know what they're talking about. It seems that Micah owned a house of Elohim, or in Hebrew, a Beit Elohim. In other words, Micah's family had set apart an area of their house, or perhaps built a small sanctuary, where they performed their own rituals and observances. The molten image of silver would be the centerpiece of the sanctuary, as the sanctuary was to be in honor of Yahusha, the Elohim of Israel. Even more, Micah had a priestly ephod manufactured to be used in the services and consecrated one of his own sons to be the priest who officiated the services. Wow, where do we start with this abomination? I'm sure most of you are shaking your heads at such a rebellious perversion of the Torah instructions by Yahusha's own people. And this only a few decades after Joshua's death. But does anyone think that Micah and his mother and household were doing this for the purpose of committing an evil? Did they go into this endeavor thinking, let's go against Yahusha? Were they bound and determined to be wicked? Of course not. They thought they were doing something good. Instead of hanging down at the local tavern, at the local pub, or brawling or murdering people like Samson did, they thought, no, we're going to be honorable, upright, spiritual people. And since the priesthood and the tabernacle's falling apart over there, because apparently by now the Philistines had buggered off with the ark, what are we to do? We want to do the right thing, so we'll do it ourselves. As you or I might think. Stuff that system. We're leaving, we're going out. We've all been called out of religion, haven't we? We'll do it ourselves, But were they doing something wicked? They didn't think they were. They thought they were doing something good. They thought they were being obedient. Their intention was to be seen by Yahusha and man as especially pious, set-apart people. They certainly had some knowledge of the divine laws given to Moses because they created an ephod, mandated in the book of Leviticus to be worn by the high priest. And they dedicated everything to Yahusha by name. Notice they're using the name Yahuwah all the time. But what they did is what it seems that Yahusha's people globally tend to do before they mature. They obey the parts of the word they like, and they do them and ignore the rest. Cherry picking the scriptures, taking the bits you like and doing those bits, ignoring the rest. Everybody's done it before we start to mature. And that's what Micah and his mother and his household are doing too. Anyway, one day a young Levite, he's actually Moses' grandson. A little bit of useless information for you. This is Moses' grandson, which just makes this story even sadder. But one day a young Levite came to Micah's house in the hill country of Ephraim. Remember, the Levites didn't own any land. They weren't given any land, just a certain amount of cities, most of which they didn't get anyway because Israel couldn't give a crap. So they're sort of wandering around looking for places to live, obviously. So he came to Micah's house in the hill country of Ephraim. He had been staying with one of the clans of Judah in Bethlehem, but he had left Bethlehem to find a new place to live where he could be a priest. "Where you from, mate?" Micah asked. "I am a Levite from Bethlehem in Judah," the man answered, "and I'm on my way to find a new place to live." This young Levite was but a temporary resident of Bethlehem, and this indicates the sad state of the priestly tribe at this time. They were not being supported by the 12 tribes as they should, and so many of them left their designated cities and sought to make a living elsewhere. But the Levites were equally at fault being filled with apostasy and self-interest that trumped their calling and duty to serve only in the Elohim of Israel. While it can't be stated with absolute certainty, there is really only one compelling reason for this young Levite to leave Bethlehem, and that's because he couldn't practice an idolatrous form of the Hebrew belief system there and sought a place where he could. Judah was perhaps the one territory and tribe who at least gave a concerned effort to stay near to the ways of Yahusha. Judah is what we call the modern day Jewish people today, and that's why they lift themselves up so much, because they are from the tribe of Judah, which is where the kings came through. King David came through, Yahusha came through, and the tribe of Judah held on to the instructions and didn't want them to be bastardized, even though they eventually bastardized them themselves. But at this point, they weren't willing to do all this syncretism and stuff, so he wasn't able to live there, so he moved on to Micah's house. We will see throughout the next several books of the scripture that of the 12 tribes, Judah was the least to be tempted into syncretism and the last to be conquered by foreigners as a divine consequence for their rebellion against Yahusha. So they stuck it out for the longest, but in the end, they succumbed like the rest of the 12 tribes. The division of loyalties within Israel between Judah and Ephraim as the lead and dominant tribes began very early on, almost as soon as the territories was divided up and allotted. We don't see a final falling out between the two until shortly after Solomon's death, around that time. But it was always inevitable that this hostile separation would occur. Thus we see that this young Levite leaves Judah and goes to the hills of Ephraim, a place that he knew was more receptive to his personal agenda and beliefs. And what's his personal agenda and beliefs? We'll soon find out. This traveller would have stayed in several homes during his journey, and undoubtedly some family or another finally directed him to Micah's. Staying in people's homes was a customary hospitality open to travellers in that day, as only in the larger cities were there rooms for hire. So he's looking for somewhere to live. So Micah said, "Why don't you stay here with me, mate? You can be my priest and tell me what Yahuwah wants me to do. And every year I'll give you 10 pieces of silver and 1 complete set of clothes, and I'll provide all your food." So the young man went for a walk. Then he agreed to stay with Micah and be his own personal priest. He lived in Micah's house, and Micah treated him like one of his own sons. So he was a young man. And he said, "I have a Levite." And Micah said, "I have a Levite now as my own priest. Now I know that Yahuwah will be kind to me." What's that about? Yahuwah has to be kind to me now because I've got a priest living under my roof. This was not divine reality. It was but ancient superstition. Micah honestly thought that Yahusha was now obligated to bless him and his household merely because he had hired a Levite to become a private priest for his family sanctuary. Micah consecrated the Levite to become a priest. Micah carried no such authority, of course. You can't just establish someone as a priest. Only Yahusha can do that. He had no authority to do that except that of old age, Middle Eastern tradition and customs. Let's remember that while in Egypt, Israel generally operated in the way that we read about here concerning Micah, it was standard operating procedure for the father to more or less be the family priest, a duty he usually passed along to his firstborn son at some point. Before Mount Sinai during their exodus, Israel had no priesthood, but all ordinances of that day revolved around priests and rituals. So every Hebrew family had their own private family priest, so to speak. And the rituals they performed took place in the home and consisted of whatever they preferred within the some hazily defined set of cultural traditions. We must also remember that Scripture is full of false statements. Before we go into that paragraph, that was how they operated before they got to Mount Sinai. The family did their own priestly duties themselves, and the firstborn son was in charge of that. And that's when Yahusha came along and said, "Your firstborns now belong to me." And he switched the firstborns for the tribe of Levi, remember? And he even balanced the books as well and made sure there were enough men to do the swap. So it was done properly. You can read about that in Leviticus and Numbers. We must also remember, this was interesting to me dealing with the book of Judges as a whole, we must also remember that Scripture is full of false statements. What? Scripture is full of false statements and lies made by men. Now, before you have a heart attack, let me explain. We find many situations and characters in the Scripture stories that are telling lies, operating on false assumptions or rationalizing their poor behavior. A classic one is the story of Balaam the sorcerer, who says all kinds of things about how the Elohim of Israel must operate, but he's wrong. King David was infamous for rationalizing away some of his darkest moments. And these words of Micah about how Yahusha would now especially bless him are another. Yahusha does not bless us for breaking his commandments or perverting his rituals and observances despite our sincerity. Thus, recorded scriptural words uttered by Yahusha or his designated prophets and messengers are factual and accurate and represent truth. But many of the words as spoken by ordinary men, although recorded accurately in the Scripture, are words that do not reflect divine truth or right, obedient principle. Most of these cases are obvious, but some fly over our heads if we don't diligently study the words of Yahusha to establish a firm foundation for our understanding. I hope this is clear to you, and you do not think I'm telling you the Scripture is full of error, which it is not, but it is full of the statements and actions of men who are in error. So that's why we got to listen to the Ruach within us, the Spirit within us. Let the Spirit reveal things, abstractly discern things through the Scripture in correct context of who it was written for and what the purpose is. So Micah's just taken on a priest, treating him like a son, paying him a wage, and he feels quite good about his household now. About this time, the tribe of Dan was looking for a place to live. They're still wandering around without a home because they wouldn't take the land they had. Place to live. They were looking for a place to live, for the other tribes had land, but the people of Dan did not really have any land to call their own because they didn't take what they'd been given by Joshua and drive out the enemy from it. In other words, each tribe was given a portion of Canaan and they were duty bound to eject the Canaanites from it. The consequence for not doing that was that you lost some or all of your territory. Or better, you simply never gained that territory. Dan was up against the Philistines, who proved to be the toughest enemy Israel would face over the long haul. And Dan finally threw in the towel and moved away to the territory not allotted to any of the other Israelite tribes. Dan's view of it was that they had not been given territory, and to them that probably meant that from a spiritual viewpoint, Yahusha had not vanquished the Philistines ahead of Dan's army, and thus the conclusion that Yahusha had not given the territory over to them. That was the very typical ancient thought pattern, regardless of what culture was involved or which deity was worshipped. So Dan's looking for a place to live. So the tribe chose 5 warriors to represent their clans and told them, "Go and find some land where we can live." So the warriors left the area of Zorah and Eshtaol and went into the hill country of Ephraim. One night they stayed at Micah's house because they heard the young Levite talking, and they knew from his accent that he was from the south. They asked him, "What are you doing here? Who brought you here?" The Levite replied, "Micah hired me as his priest." Then he told them how well Micah had treated him. "Please talk to Yahuwah for us," the men said. Ask him if we will be successful in what we're trying to do." "Don't worry," answered the priest. "Yahuwah is pleased with what you're doing." So the 5 men left and went to the town of Laish, whose people were from Sidon. But Sidon was too far away to protect them. Even though their town had no walls, the people thought they were safe from attack, so they had not even asked anyone else for protection, which meant that the tribe of Dan could easily take over Laish. 5 men went back to Zorah and Eshtaol, where their relatives asked, "Did you find any land?" "Let's go," the 5 men said. "We saw some very good land with enough room for all of us, and it has everything we will ever need. What are you waiting for? Let's attack and take it. You'll find that the people think they're safe." The people think they're safe, but Yahuwah is giving the land to us. 600 men from the tribe of Dan strapped on their weapons and left Zorah and Eshtaol with their families. One night they camped near Kiriath-Jearim in the territory of Judah, and that's why the place just west of Kiriath-Jearim is still known as Dan's camp. Then they went into the hill country of Ephraim. When they came close to Micah's house, the 5 men who had been spies asked the other warriors, "Did you know that someone in this village has several idols and even a sacred priestly vest, an ephod? What do you think we should do about that?" So the 600 warriors left the road and went to the house of Micah's property, where the young Levite priest lived. They stood at the gate and greeted the priest. Meanwhile, the 5 men who had been there before went into Micah's house and stole the sacred priestly vest and the idols. "Oi!" the priest shouted. "What do you think you're doing?" "Be quiet," the men said. "Keep your mouth shut and listen. Why don't you come with us and be our priest, so you can tell us what Yahuwah wants us to do? You can stay here. You could stay here and be a priest for one man's family, but wouldn't you rather be the priest for a clan or even a whole tribe of Yisrael?" And the priest really liked that idea. This young priest, this grandson of Moses, really liked that idea. So he took the vest and the idols, the vest that the high priest wore that they'd made, the ephod. He took the vest and the idols and joined the others from the tribe of Dan. Then they turned and left after putting their children, their cattle and the rest of their other possessions in front. But they had only travelled for a short time before Micah asked his neighbours to help him get all his things back. So he and his men caught up with the people of Dan and shouted for them to stop. They turned to face him and asked, "What the hell? Why did you bring all these men?" "You know what's wrong," Micah said. "You stole the idols I made and you took my priest. Now I don't have anything left." "Do we look like we're interested in your sob story?" people of Dan said. "Now get the hell out of here before you make us angry and you get yourself and your family all killed. Go on, get out of here. We're not interested in your sob story." And after this they turned and left, and Micah realised there was no way he could win a fight with them. So he went home. So the tribe of Dan took Micah's priest and the things Micah had made and headed for Laish, which was located in the valley controlled by the town of Beth-rehob. Laish was defenceless because it had no walls and was too far from Sidon for the Sidonians to help defend it. The leaders of Laish had not even asked nearby towns to help them in case of any attack. The warriors of Dan made a surprise attack on Laish, killing everyone and burning it down. Then they rebuilt the town and settled there themselves. But they named it Dan, after one of Yisrael's sons, who was the ancestor of their tribe. So it was called Laish, and when Dan's people moved in, they called it Dan. And even though the tabernacle of sorts was in Shiloh, of sorts because it's starting to be dismantled at this point, and no one gives a toss about it. So even though the tabernacle of sorts was in Shiloh, the people of Dan set up the idol Micah had made and worshipped the idol. And the Levite, Moses' grandson, was their priest. How sad. His name was Jonathan, and he was a descendant of Gershom, the son of Moses. His descendants served as a priest for the tribe of Dan until the people of Yisrael were taken away as prisoners by their enemies. What about this insanity? I haven't written it here, but many translations don't even say the son of Moses. They say the son of Manasseh, because they're so embarrassed that this story can be revolved around their greatest leader, Moses. They don't want his name attached to it at all, so they changed his name, the name in the account to Manasseh, but the true Hebrew says Moses, because it was Moses' grandson, the son of Gershom, So how embarrassing. This is how, in 2 short generations. This chapter ends with an interesting reference to Micah's idol being used by the tribe of Dan, while the house of Yahusha, the tabernacle, was in Shiloh. Shiloh was where the wilderness tabernacle was erected and semi-permanently located when Israel entered the promised land. It was there where the official priesthood operated. It would later be transferred to Bethel, and we'll even find the Ark of the Blood Covenant Witness gets moved around quite a bit, more than the tabernacle itself does. The point being that almost immediately after Joshua wasn't around to run things with an iron rod, every element of Hebrew society began backsliding at an alarming rate. So the resounding and repeated underlying premise for the entire book of Judges is, as we've said, there was no king in Israel, so every man did what was right in his own eyes. Every man did what was right in his own eyes. They thought they had the right to behave how they wanted to behave. So there's a little account in Lego form. Go and investigate the land. And they found Laish. Howdy, we'll slaughter you, and now we'll call it Dan. So we're going to talk about venom. Victoria had an interesting article put up this morning or last night about venom, and it ties in with this whole thing. Every man did what was right in his own eyes. Everyone does whatever the hell they want. Isn't it the same when you look at the Messianic Nazarene swill? Everyone does whatever they want. Just take a meander down the cesspool called Facebook and see the insanity. Anyway, let's finish with this a short article here. Venom. This is Victoria speaking, I had a dream about a month ago about being trapped in a caravan full of snakes, having to fight my way out of it, which was quite terrifying. And I've been meaning to write about the spiritual implication of the experience. So let's talk about venom. Venom. In the Hebrew it means bitterness, a bitter thing, especially bile, venom of a serpent, bitter thing, gall, poisonous plant, probably the poppy, all that wormwood gall stuff. From its conspicuous head, generally poison of a serpent, gall, hemlock, poison, venom, bitterness, sharpness of taste, lack of sweetness, sharpness, acidity, harshness, resentment, antagonism. Remember, we're looking at behavior here. Come from the Hebrew word into more behavioral words: harshness, resentment, antagonism, anger, spitefulness, ferocity, hatred, loathing, detestation. Venom, poison, bile, anger, and disappointment at being treated unfairly. Disappointment at being treated unfairly. Resentment. So, Scripture says, don't let a root of bitterness grow up within you. We've got different seeds that He's planted in us, haven't we? We don't want the seed of bitterness. This venom can seep into us so easily by just a hint of resentment to cause us such harmful damage to our being and to those around us. If you let those thoughts come in, if you entertain them for even a short time, they'll make you angry and bitter. And they can cause such harmful damage to our being and those around us. This behavior can cause us to get sick and have physical repercussions while we continue in this state. As believers, we do not have the right to think we can vent our anger about anything and get away with it. We don't have the right to think we can vent our anger about anything and get away with it. You don't have the right to vent your anger. So shut the hell up. Yahusha will not stand for it and will send pressure and suffering to us until we give in to His way. Even though Yahusha has forgiven us while we were still full of rage and is wooing us over to His way of life by the prods and goading, He will not stop until we give in, and His truth always wins. He will not stop. So Yahusha will not stop until we give in, and His truth always wins. His truth always wins. It doesn't matter how much you kick and scream and throw little temper tantrums and show moods and attitudes. His truth always wins. He will not give in and he will not stop. You do not get away with anything with Yahusha. A glance in the wrong direction, a thought that you shouldn't have, you get away with nothing, because he hears all, he sees all, he knows all. So, he will not stop until we give in, and his truth always wins. The truth of the scripture is our guide and power to disperse this evil, tormenting spirit that sneaks into our being by way of attitudes. The truth of the scripture is our guide and the power to disperse this evil, tormenting spirit. Do you face that your behavior, your attitudes, your looks, the words you say are not you? They are an evil, tormenting spirit, used not just to torment and pester and make your life a living hell, but to use you to make that for others as well, to destroy other people as well, through your words, through your behavior. It can either be life or death. There's a big attack going on, guys. Ephesians 4. Let no corrupt word come out of your mouth, but only such as is good for the use of building up, so as to impart what is pleasant to the hearers. Stop there. It's not like we have to guess, is it? It's not like the guys in the wilderness, the guys in the book of Judges. It's not like Israel had to guess how to please their Elohim, is it? He went through stringent details. He spared no detail. He explained everything, how to draw close to him. In fact, he commanded them, this is how you got to do it if you want me in your camp. This is just how it's got to be, because I am perfect. I'm set apart and you need to be the same. Same with today. He doesn't leave it up to our imagination or our common sense or what we think is right in our eyes. He tells us regarding your behavior, regarding the words that come out of your mouth, what should we say? What shouldn't we say? I'm not sure how to do this properly. Look, it's in the scripture. Let no corrupt word come out of your mouth. What is a corrupt word? Well, only say things that are good for building up, encouraging, imparting what is pleasant to the hearers. If you have the old saying, if you got nothing nice to say, shut the hell up. Yeah? Only say things that doesn't mean you shut up and have horrible behavior. Show people through your eyes and your face and your, body language. No. My point is, if you don't have to guess, this is how to behave. This is the words we should speak. And the good thing to realize is that if this is hard for you, what is it that's flowing through you all the time? It's not you. If you're finding it hard to not say things that are building up, encouraging and pleasant, if you find it hard to speak pleasant and nice things and lovely and kind, if you find it hard being kind, what's controlling you? That's the thing you're not looking at. You're being used. Your vessel is being used, as a surrogate for evil. But unclean spirits, these evil, tormenting spirits, aren't interested in things that are pleasant, not interested in things that are encouraging or building up. So, do not grieve the set-apart spirit of Yahuwah, by whom you are sealed for the day of redemption. Let all bitterness and wrath. Why would you be grieving the set-apart spirit? Because he's turned his back. He's stepped away from you. He can't be close to you when you behave like that. He can't be close to Yisrael when they're doing all this insanity, crying out in his name and building silver idols and gold idols and bowing down to them and getting your ass, stuff that priesthood over there, stuff Shiloh and the tabernacle and the ark. We'll do our own thing in our own home, Despite that Yahusha said he hates it, there's got to be one, priesthood, this, that. No, That's how you grieve Yahusha, by doing things that he hates, behaving the the way he hates. Let all bitterness and wrath and displeasure and uproar and slander be put away from you. How do you put those things away from you? You don't let them come through you. Because bitterness, wrath, displeasure, uproar, slander is the opposite. He's telling us what to do and he's telling us what not to do. We don't have to guess. Don't let anything come out of your mouth unless it's good, uplifting, upbuilding, pleasant. Because if you do, then you'll be doing this. Bitterness, wrath, displeasure, uproar, slander. That's the opposite to encouraging, building up, and imparting pleasantness, kindness. So which do you want? Which spirit do you want? Yahusha's in the positive. He says, my words to you are always uplifting and true to give you hope, peace, life, a future. As many thoughts, I can't hear him. He sends as many thoughts to you every day as there are grains of sand on the seashore. If you ain't hearing them, there's something wrong with your tuner, So, get rid of all those things, put them away from you, along with all evil. Evil. Scriptures, we've been going through what evil is for the last year and a half now. What evil is, what abominable behaviours are. We don't have to guess anything, guys. And be kind towards one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, as Yahuwah also forgave you in Mashiach. What an amazing paragraph. See why these are called the living words? Because if you take them into you, they feed your spirit, they feed your essence, they feed the seed that's been planted. Feed the seed, seed the feed the seed inside you to make it grow. You see? Let no corrupt word come out of your mouth. Wow. So, if people are not doing this to you, there are rules in place for you to protect yourself. Am I letting them have that? They're not being kind. They're saying corrupt things to me. They're saying things that are putting me down. This, that. It's not tender. It's not forgiving. It's not loving. That's what's coming at me all the time. What are you going to do about it? Because you're walking in the, you're living amongst the walking dead. A zombie apocalypse. That's what we live in now. So, our instruction is to not let corrupt words come out of our mouth. Only what is pleasant and kind and loving between the brothers and sisters. Out in the world, just don't take a thing they say personally. Don't take a thing they do personally, because they're all controlled by demon forces, tormenting evil spirits. They're tormented. They can't sleep. They've got apps now. There's so many apps on the phones to lull people to sleep and meditate and, even just take 5 minutes out of your day and push this app and you'll hear the waves and the birds and and when it's over, you'll feel refreshed. Meditation apps, it's all BS, guys. There's no peace in the world. People are reliving nightmares and torturous situations in their head every time they put their head on the pillow, There's no peace. He says that. It's part of the curse. But we can have peace. But even though you've been immersed, you've got to start behaving. Yahusha will give you a time to get your act together. After a while, he starts coming in and slamming you big time. So if you feel like you're not getting away with the stuff you used to get away with, it's because you're not. And if you're feeling like crap all the time, it's because he's not letting you get away with anything anymore. He doesn't like the words coming out of your mouth. They're hideous. He doesn't like your behavior. He doesn't like your habits, your cleanliness, your chaos, anything in your life. He doesn't like any of it. And that's why he comes to us and starts moving slowly and more and more and more and more. Okay? Otherwise, if he leaves you, if you grieve him, if he leaves, you'll be grieving big time. I mean, look at Israel. Yahusha's not even in there. Drops in here and there, but he can't come close because look how they behave. It's all about behavior. I've been saying it for 5 years now. It's all about behavior. The more your behavior improves and is perfected and transformed, the closer Yahusha comes to you. The more of him is within you. The more of him takes over you. So what do you want? We've got one more episode to go, guys, in Judges, and it's a doozy. It's a big one. So we'll see you shortly.